Hello and welcome. This is Bicycle Touring Talk, episode number 50. In this series, I tell you the stories that happened to me on my bicycle tours. I love to share them because I believe they're amazing. The voyage we're covering right now took me from Cancun, Quintana Roo, Mexico, to Panama City, Panama in early 2013. Last time, we left off at the Costa Rican border after a long journey across Nicaragua. It was February 23rd. I'd been battling strong winds pretty much the entire way from San Juan del Sur. By the time I reached the border, I was tired and out of Nicaraguan money. Before leaving Nicaragua, I had to pass another passport control and pay a departure fee. With no local currency left, I thought this could be a problem. But as it turned out, those border guys loved my American dollars a lot more than their Cordobas. So much for my designated Panama money. Well, I had some left, probably enough for a room once I crossed that border. Panama, like El Salvador, is using US currency. The Costa Rica border control had a huge lineup of other travelers. I had arrived at the same time as a bus full of tourists who were all dragging their luggage with them through the controls. This was new to me. Costa Rica was scanning everyone's suitcase and checking every passport diligently. My bike was packed outside with all its panniers, and luckily I was able to keep an eye on it through the large windows. Were they going to make me take them all off and run them through the scanner? When it was my turn, I was asked for some more dollars and quizzed about my tour. Where was I going to stay? Of course, I had no idea, which didn't exactly make me popular with the officers. How long was I going to stay? Let me think. A week? Maybe 2? Okay, where was my ticket back to Canada? Ha! I thought. That one I had. When I showed the crumpled printout of my flight ticket information, the officer said it was no good because I was departing from Panama. I must have looked puzzled, so when I didn't respond right away, the officer asked to see a bus ticket to Panama or any kind of proof that I was going to be able to pay my way there. Finally, I told him about my bicycle that was leaning outside against the window. I was relieved and almost a bit surprised when the officer proceeded to stamp my passport and wished me a safe trip. No need to scan my luggage. Awesome. There was a long lineup of transport truck on the Costa Rica side waiting to enter Nicaragua. Vendors were selling snacks to them, and it sure looked like they were used to long wait times. It reminded me of my own trucking days, especially after 9/11/2001 when crossing the US border had become a major ordeal. I had another 20 kilometers of cycling to get to the first town, La Cruz. It was still a bit of a battle with the wind, but there was more vegetation here and it helped a lot. La Cruz wasn't a very big town. I easily found an ATM to get some local currency and an inexpensive room at a place called Cabañas Santa Rita. The lady at the reception was young and loved the idea of cycling across her country, but also warned me of the dangers. Costa Rica had a great reputation for tourism, but not many tourists travel by bike and go the route I was going. Before handing me my room key, she gave me a high five with the words,
Pura vida.
This means pure life, and it's a slogan Costa Ricans like to use. It's almost like saying, "How are you?" in North America. La Cruz was fun to explore. Once again, I had to find a place to eat supper and ask around the stores to find out if anyone was selling maps, a problem I had whenever entering a new country. There was a unique lookout point from where I could see all the way to the ocean and admire the sunset colors just before nightfall. The next morning I had breakfast at the same place I had eaten supper and then didn't waste much time. My goal for the day was to get to Liberia, a small city about 50 kilometers away. The ride was tougher than expected as I was still battling strong winds that were blowing from all sides with gusts that were strong enough to push me off track at times. The scenery, though, was quite stunning, and eventually there were some hills that broke the wind. I had lunch along the way and trouble calculating how much it actually cost. The currency of Costa Rica is called colon. 1 Canadian dollar is worth close to 500 colon, which means the amounts are in thousands for everything you buy. You get used to this, but paying 3,700 of anything just for a simple lunch was something I had to get used to. A sloppy calculation revealed that this was about $7.35, which was definitely expensive compared to what I had become accustomed to. Liberia had some kind of civic celebration going on and was a bit tough to navigate at first. It also seemed like hotels were pretty busy on this weekend, but thanks to some locals who were partying in the street with horses and cowboy hats, I found a cheap place that seemed okay. Liberia was an interesting place to explore. There was a building that locals told me was a former prison, but in the process of becoming a museum. I really liked the look of it, but couldn't get inside. Then there was the main plaza with lots of food vendors. Surprisingly, priced very cheap, and a ton of people who were enjoying the evening. There was something going on in the big white church. The atmosphere was great, and I was enjoying every minute of it. A lady approached me and asked me where I was from. She looked a bit rough, and I wasn't really sure what she was up to, but it turned out she was just curious, and we ended up having a lively conversation. She even bought some mango for us to share, but declined when I offered to buy her some ice cream. My hotel was in a quiet street and quite comfortable. I slept really well and took my time the next morning. Walking around the plaza again after breakfast, I actually found a vendor who had a map of Costa Rica for cheap. Another problem solved. I really wasn't sure what my route to Panama should be, but wanted to enjoy some more time on the beach. This meant that cycling along the Nicoya Peninsula was probably my best bet. I decided on the spot to go to the city of Nicoya that day, which was about 80 kilometers away. The ride was much easier than I had experienced in recent days. Perhaps the wind was now helping me a bit, but it had calmed as well, so that I barely noticed it at all. There were fewer roadside stores than what I was used to, and their prices for soft drinks were about double that of Nicaragua. So I stuck mostly to drinking warm water from the gallon I was always hauling on my rear rack. One cold drink is nothing, but keep buying them, and it really affects the budget. Then I came across a Pali supermarket, which seemed to carry a lot of Walmart branded products and had much lower prices. Nicoya didn't seem all that special, but accommodation was inexpensive and there were more supermarkets that allowed me to buy some snacks and juice at more modest prices than I had seen out on the road. One thing about the Nicoya Peninsula that I found out is that people who live here have a very high life expectancy. It seems very common here to live past the age of 100. Honestly, I have no clue why that could be, but perhaps the secret can't be uncovered in just a few days. I stayed at Hotel Jenny for a night, planning to make it back to the beach the next day and spend a couple of nights. The beaches were not very far from Nicoya, but I was ready to travel quite a bit to find a place with inexpensive accommodation. This was a prime tourist destination, and my expectation was to pay quite a bit for the 2 nights. When I got to Playa Samara, it seemed like my expectations were confirmed. There were definitely more tourists here than locals, and as typical with resort towns, they were here for a short while with a fat wallet. I was looking around and there didn't seem to be any suitable accommodation here for me. But there was also a tourist information, and I decided to go ask. It turned out there was a hostel that also allowed tent camping. The camping spot was just $5. It gave me
access to a common area with hammocks and a bar, as well as a full kitchen.
I had found my paradise. The place had a true vacation atmosphere, and it didn't disappoint in any way. I met people from Canada, the US, and Europe here, and had a great time. The staff at the hostel even offered dinner for the low price of $4. It was truly amazing, and I was probably desperate for some company by now after riding alone for quite some time. My extra day was exactly as I had dreamed. Samara is simply amazing. I spent a lot of time chasing birds, with a camera of course. It's amazing how fast those huge pelicans can dive bomb to catch fish, and it's truly challenging to try catching it on camera. Besides birds, there were all kinds of people on the beach, doing all kinds of things. The water was warm. This was probably the best beach day of my entire tour. Samara has a lot of beautiful tall palm trees. Looking for paradise? This is probably as close as you're going to find. It's great even if you're cheap like me, because there's also a Pali supermarket here. Why did I leave this place after only 2 nights? I'm not sure, but rumor had it that the road ahead was challenging, and I still had no idea how long it would take me to get to Panama City, even though the distance had shrunk significantly. The Nicoya Peninsula is quite large to circle, but there was supposed to be an option of taking a ferry back to the mainland on the southern tip of it. At this point, I wasn't sure if this was the right idea, but planned my route with that in mind. There was a town called Montezuma about 100 kilometers further south. I figured I could make it there pretty easily in a day, not knowing much about the road ahead. The young lady who was running Mariposa, the hostel, seemed to think that the road was okay, even if gravel, but she also admitted that she hadn't ever traveled it all the way to Montezuma. Others were telling me there were some rivers with no way across, and sometimes there was no way to pass them. I left Samara on the last day of February, right after a self-cooked breakfast with coffee from the hostel and good company. It turned out to be a really tough day. The first few kilometers were a breeze, paved road, smooth riding. As soon as the pavement ended, the troubles began. After only riding on the rough gravel for a short while, it was clear that my rear tire had a leak. I made it up a hill and decided that changing the tube was the way to go. I had a brand new spare tube, purchased in Nicaragua not even a week earlier. But there was a big surprise when I tried pumping it up with my trusty hand pump from Dollarama. I'm not kidding. Why was it taking so long to pump it up? Yep, the darn tube was leaking worse than the old one. I was up on a cliff, with fantastic view by the way, but there was a breeze and finding a small puncture in my tire seemed impossible. The spare that I had tried to install had air bubbles in the rubber that popped easily when there was air in the tube. Obviously, a manufacturer's defect. This thing was useless. My other tube had a leak too small to detect under the circumstances. I finally resorted to putting it back on the wheel and pumping some air into it every 2 or 3 kilometers. Well, it may have been 5 or 6 kilometers at first, but the intervals kept getting shorter and soon it seemed like I was never going to get anywhere. What had I been thinking trying to go almost 100 kilometers on such roads in a day? Then, at one point, I noticed that my front brakes were out of adjustment, bad enough to be totally ineffective. The cause? My handlebar stem had come loose and moved lower. There went more time digging out the wrenches and putting it back together the way it's supposed to be, hoping it would survive the rest of this shitty road. Yes, that's what it was. The road was probably the worst one of the entire trip, and yet when you look at the pictures, it becomes clear that this was the kind of adventure that becomes unforgettable. A challenge for sure, but also a trek through paradise. To top it all off, I had to cross 3 rivers by wading right through. Since I had a lowrider rack in the front at the time, I had to make a separate trip with the front panniers so they wouldn't get soaked. It was shortly after that that I ran out of daylight in the middle of nowhere. The rest of the trip seemed to take forever. If you ever tried riding a loaded bicycle with a leaky rear tire on a gravel road in the dark, on the rough gravel road, mind you, well, I did, and I wouldn't recommend it. Thankfully, there wasn't much traffic to speak of. Perhaps 2 or 3 cars the entire way, and I could see their lights from far enough away. Just thinking of the idea of being on that road in the dark without knowing how far I had left to go kind of freaks me out. But at the time, I was just doing what I could and didn't really worry about it much. Ride the bouncy road until the tire got too soft, then pump the damn thing back up. It seemed like a curse, especially knowing that some of the air wasn't going to stay in there at all. So much work just to stay mobile. But it was way better than pushing the bike. Finally, I arrived in a village and wondered if this was Montezuma. It wasn't. But I was lucky enough to find a hotel. The lady who ran it even offered to warm up some food for dinner. It was a decent place. The only one in this village called Cobano. I was way too tired to worry about checking my tire, but at least I had a room with a sink and even a toilet tank and no wind. I could fix the tire in the morning and then figure out what to do and where to go next. I fell asleep with the TV still on. If you want to know what happened the next morning, March 1st, then you'll have to look for my episode 51 next Saturday. You can make this a lot easier by subscribing and enabling notifications. But you know that already, don't you? While you're here, check out some of my older videos. You might enjoy them too. Thank you for watching. Keep watching, and I'll see you soon. And I am
the one and only, the one and only, the one and only.